Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I am so excited to talk to my guest today. You know what? I say that every time, but I'm always very excited to talk to my guests. But today we're going to be talking about something very specific, and that's about freelancing. And I think a lot of people, first of all, they don't know what it is, so we're going to find that out. But it's also a great way for people to be bringing in extra money, to start their own company, to make six figures and more. So we're going to have a great discussion today with Amy Posner. Welcome, Amy. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm really well. Excited to be here.
Cool. I love it. Well, let me give people just a little bit of information about you, and then we will jump into this. So Amy is a seasoned online entrepreneur and business coach who helps digital creative freelancers build breakthrough businesses. Over her 30-year career, Amy has launched 6 successful businesses, 5 of which are still in business today, and mentored thousands of freelancers to success. Now she focuses on empowering freelancers to grow the business they want by teaching them the skills they need to attract the right clients, something she teaches in her Complete Breakthrough Freelancer course and as a co-host of the Business Badassery podcast. Amy has been featured on Copyhackers and as a guest on several top podcasts, including the Copywriter Club, Copy Chief Radio, and the Deliberate Freelancer, among others. So again, Amy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's talk about all this juicy stuff.
Let's dig into this. So first of all, tell us how you got to where you are today, because I think people really want to know how it is that you decided that you're going to freelance and help freelancers as your business.
Well, let me tell you, and I'll condense the long story short, since 30 years is a long time. It's interesting because I grew up in a family business and never wanted to be a business person. I was like, oh, I'm going to be the creative one. And I set off to do other things. And then I ended up getting a job in New York City with a guy who, just a really nice guy, very interesting. We became friends. We would hang out and talk after work. And I always had ideas, it was like, I would talk to him about marketing or how we could grow things. And he liked my ideas. And after about a year, offered me to buy in as a business partner. Ooh. And it came totally out of left field for me, but it seemed really, I was enjoying myself. It seemed like a good idea. It seemed potentially lucrative. And so I borrowed money and bought in and never looked back. I loved it. It was so interesting. And it turned out to be really creative because we would invent things and make them happen. And I just found that to be just really fun and interesting. So fast forward all these years, I've been very fortunate, successful, I don't know, in being able to move out of businesses either by transitioning out or selling them and like taking some time to travel and do some other things that interested me. But what happened about 10 years ago, I became a copywriter and I had a marketing and copywriting business. And people started coming to me for coaching or for advice. And, what we say in the business world, when enough people are knocking on your door for a thing, it's probably a thing.
Right. You should start charging money for it.
Right. So it's like, maybe this is a thing. But it turns out I really, really liked coaching and mentoring people. But what I discovered over the course of mentoring freelancers particularly is that you could have people with really great skills, didn't have any business chops.
Right.
They just do not eat as well as a mediocre craftsperson who's a really good business person. And so I decided to take that on as my personal challenge because the business skills are really important, but they're not fun. They're not sexy. Nobody wants to.
I don't like invoicing. People who listen to the program know I hate invoicing.
Right. It's just not stuff that people get into business to learn. You get into business because you're passionate about something or you want to help people and you want to do something. And then you're like, oh, but wait, I need clients. I have to write
Mhm.
proposals. I have to figure out pricing.
I have to eat.
And to eat. And what happens is if you neglect to figure that out, you tend to just deal with what shows up at your door.
Right.
And so you're not being deliberate. And that can lead to stress, burnout, and it leads to feast and famine. And that's the problem that we need to solve, because it's too stressful.
I love it. You know, and I was looking on your website, which is pretty easy. It's amyposner.com. And so great stuff. But what it says here is, are you ready for clients who bring you interesting projects and higher fees, a bank balance that means you don't have to worry about what happens in the next 12 months? I love that, because we want that, right? But we have no idea how to get from wanting it to doing it.
100%. And there's not a lot of blueprints for the solopreneur, for the small business owner.
Right.
And I think what happens a lot is people tend to go out in the wild and see what other people are doing. And it's like, oh, Deb's doing this. Maybe I should do this. But it's like, but I work for Deb. I don't know if it'll work for me. I also don't know what's behind the scenes, right? We only see the sort of the finished product. And so I think there's a lot of experimenting. And what happens is people get into what I call the spin. Because they like, I go along and I'm doing what I thought Deb was doing. And then I get to like a certain point and I'm like, but wait, did she do it this way, that way? Should I keep going? Should I stop? But wait, I've invested all this time, but what if it's not right? And then you don't move because you don't know what the right thing to do is. And when when I work with clients, I'm able to say like literally stop the spin, like put my hand virtually on their shoulders.
No more hamster wheel.
Right. Like, let's get off the wheel and let's look at the facts and make a decision. And they're sometimes afraid to do that, but I'm not. And so I can say, let's go over here. Let's pivot 10 degrees. Let's keep going forward. Let's go 180. And so I think that's what's really helpful for people is to get out of that spin, figure out what they need to do. And all of it's in service to building the business that you want, which also people don't know that they can do, right? You can make this what you need it to be for you. And I believe you should, because if you're going to put in that time and effort, and we know it's a lot, like it should be something that really satisfies you.
Right. And it should be something that, as you said, becomes that business. I remember it's, over 30 years ago when I decided to launch my company, somebody asked me, do you want it to be a hobby or a business? And I remember thinking, right? Because it was something that I did for fun. And the thought of, wait a minute, I could actually make this a business totally threw me. And I, because I did have fun doing it and volunteering to do marketing for people, and all of those various things. But the thought of actually making it a business paralyzed me.
Oh, interesting. And did you end up making it a business?
I did. It's called Wise Women Communications, and it's still functioning today. But I've learned some pretty hard lessons along the way, but I think that is what so many people do, because a lot of times they are doing this as a hobby or as a volunteer or things like that. And then they're stopping to think, wait a minute, maybe I could make money at this. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that happens is people mean to make a business out of it. But they end up making like sort of hobby income, right? Or it feels more like a hobby because it's not structured, and they don't feel like they have any control over it necessarily.
Right.
It's great that someone asked you that question, though. Like, what a nice discernment early in.
Well, and I wasn't even sure what they meant. I mean, it was like, what?
Maybe.
Yeah. Well, and it was almost, wait a minute, you mean I could get paid doing this?
Yeah.
And they, and they said, yes, but, and of course that's a very big but, and because it was a lot of stuff that I had no knowledge of, business license, tax ID number, all of those things that you were mentioning, that wait a minute, you mean I have to invoice people? I have to go out. And of course, one of the biggest things, I think, without a doubt, is probably, what do we charge?
Yeah, that's a big one.
So talk to us about that, because I think that is one of the biggest issues that people have. And I think especially women, because we don't want to bother We
Yeah.
don't want to overcharge. We want to help people. And so we don't charge what we're worth.
Yeah, it's a chronic problem. It really is. And it can be a tricky one because the truth is, like out in the marketplace, there are people paying vastly different sums, seem like the same work.
Right.
Like, for example, like in the copywriting space, it's not unusual like that there's somebody that's maybe paying $3,000 for a sales page over here, and somebody over here might be paying 12 or 15,000.
Right. Or somebody went to Fiverr and spent $50.
Right. And so, and you have to ask, like, is it the client? Is it the project? Is it the contractor? And so I think one of the things that's important to understand first in the market, like whoever you are, whatever you do, is who buys what you sell. And that may seem really like sort of a simple thing to say.
Right.
But if there are people who buy for 3,000 and there are people that buy for 12,000, what's the difference and where do you want
and you might be perfectly happy at the $3,000 level, but you're going to have to work a little bit harder to get up, you're going to have 4 times as many people, right? Did I do my math right? To be able to meet that level.
But caveat there, that's really an interesting one is, like, of course, the $12,000 sounds more appealing, right? Like the numbers sound great. And like everyone wants to land big number projects. The thing with big number projects, those they're often really complex. Lots of moving parts and lots of people involved. You may love that and you may not. On the other hand, it may be much easier for you to do $3,000 projects, and they might be easier to sell as well. And so there can be an advantage as an expert for being positioned in different ways. And so those are the kinds of things that people don't know that they get to think about, right? Like, oh, I could choose the types of projects and even like the type of dollar amount. And the top dollar amount isn't the most desirable thing necessarily. Because like I remember in my career, the first time I landed a $25,000 project, and I think it was really 24 and change, but it was a big number, right? And I was really nervous and I was really excited and like, but I did it. I landed it. And I landed bigger projects after that. And I felt very accomplished. Like, this is great. Someone's, I can make this kind of an arrangement. But Dad, they were so involved. They lasted so long.
And a lot of times they want a lot from you.
Yes. And I don't mind giving a lot, but what I found is I really like things with a tighter time frame. And I like being involved with clients long term, but I don't like being involved with one project long term. I like get in, get out, test the results, improve, iterate, get in, get out. Like that just was a better style for me. But you asked about pricing, so let me circle back to that, because this is around pricing. But so now that you know that there's these vastly different things that people pay, I think the first thing to think about, and this will sound perhaps obscure to your listeners, but the first thing to think about is the problem and the solution. Like, what problems do you like solving? And maybe you like solving those big complex problems. You like solving these simpler problems. So that's the first thing to know. What do you want to solve, and who do you want to solve it for?
Okay.
And then, because these different marketplaces, they value different skill sets differently. And so, if you do a little investigation, you can find out where, say you're a web designer. Well, it might turn out that, a corporate entity or a client in the C-suite is going to understand it more and pay more than the brand new coach who just got their coaching license and is sort of going like, oh, geez, now I need clients. What do I do? Very different, entity with probably a different budget and different needs. And I know people who love that coach. They love wrapping around that individual and saying, oh, how can I help make this grow? And they've got a reasonable fee, which that is probably correct for that person. On the other hand, that someone in the C-suite may think, no, I need somebody who's, got experience, handling these big complex projects, maybe has a team, certainly has processes in place. So first, there's sort of where you want to be planted, and understanding that the small brand new solo business owner just is going to have less budget than the big established entity, but you may love them. You may love helping them. And so you create offers that are appropriate, meet your financial needs, but also solve their problems. And here's the bugger of it. And this is the thing people hate. You got to time what you do. You got to know how long it takes you to do a thing.
Right.
You have no idea
Mm-hmm.
what you're making. And in
Yeah.
the digital
Are you ending up charging $2 an hour? You know?
and no kidding on
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
You know, I have a client who's a fine artist
Mhm.
who is so particular and so
Right.
perfectionist that at the end of the, like the fee that she
Mhm.
charges for painting sounds great, but at
Mhm.
the end of the day, we figured out, I mean, that's kind of what she was
Mhm.
making on
Right.
that. But she can't do less, so she needs to charge more, right?
Mhm.
Because she
Right.
can't
Yeah.
compromise
Because
her work.
for
That's her,
especially when she's being creative like that, because she's not going to do halfway, right? You know?
no, she can't.
Mhm.
I mean, she literally can't.
Mhm.
She can't herself.
Mhm.
So the thing you need to know is how long it takes you to do a
Mhm.
thing. And the thing, and this won't surprise anyone, it always takes you longer than you
Mhm.
think, right?
Right.
Like you're like, oh, that takes me about 10 hours. And then you time yourself
Mhm.
and you're like, oh, that took
Oh.
20 hours. How's that possible?
Mhm.
But if you're charging $100 an hour just to choose a round number
Mhm.
and it takes you 10 hours,
Mhm.
you know, that's really different than
Right.
if, you know, if you're, well, actually that
Mhm.
doesn't work. It's more in terms of project pricing,
Mhm.
knowing
Mhm.
what you charge. And the
Right.
hourly, you're charging hourly. I'm
Mhm.
not a fan of charging hourly, by the way.
No.
Uh,
Mhm.
no,
It
I'm
all
really
depends on what you're doing, but yeah, you should have project structure type of thing. Mhm.
100%.
Mhm.
And I suspect your audience understands that and
Mhm.
knows, you know, kind of how that works. But
Mhm.
I think the main thing with pricing is knowing how long something takes you
Mhm.
and then looking at your entire big picture
Mhm.
and how much money you want to make,
Mhm.
and then
Mhm.
accounting for things like overhead and taxes and the
Right.
amount of time that you have, and
Mhm.
realizing that, you know, the money you make as a business is not your money,
Mhm.
right? Like as an employee, if they,
Mhm.
you know, you get a check, it's yours.
Mhm. Right. You're
As a
the
business,
business owner, you might not ever get a check.
right, you get a check and like it
Mhm.
belongs to the government, for
Mhm.
taxes,
Mhm.
it belongs to, you know, overhead and business
Mhm.
expenses,
Yeah.
belongs to admin and, you know,
Mhm.
maybe any like people that, you know, do tasks for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you need to factor that in. And
Mhm.
honestly, I think that's the hardest thing for people,
Mhm.
because if you don't have that mentality,
Mhm.
you like, and you know, you mentioned like particularly with women, what the tendency is to think is, why should my client pay for that?
Mhm.
Those are my business
Right.
expenses.
Yeah. I have to have this computer.
Right. But your dentist doesn't think like that.
No.
You know, your accountant doesn't think
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
And you need to start thinking like they do. Your
Mhm.
time is valuable,
Mhm.
and you need to get paid. You
Mhm.
need to get paid well for it.
Right.
And you need to get paid well enough that you
Mhm.
can cover all those expenses
Mhm.
without
Mhm.
crying at the end of the year. And you've
Right.
seen it, I'm sure, and I have too. People who
Mhm.
are like they didn't realize.
Mhm.
And now, you know, they thought they were doing themselves something great for themselves, and
Right. Yeah.
now they're broken and in
Mhm.
debt. And
Mhm.
so it's really important to know
Mhm.
what you're making and be sure that
Mhm.
you're covering enough to make yourself a decent
Mhm.
salary and, you know, and cover your
Mhm.
business expenses.
Right.
And I'm just going to say randomly, for most people starting new
Mhm.
in the digital freelance
Mhm.
sort of creative space, $75 to $80 an hour is not an unreasonable
Right.
basic
Mhm.
minimum. And
Mhm.
it's probably, that's not going to make you a whole ton of money, even though
Mhm.
it sounds like a lot when you think
Yeah,
of
I'm sure there are people who
hourly.
went, "Wow, I could make that." But you're not making it 80 hours a week.
No,
That's the trick.
right. And you're not making it 80 hours, 80
Mhm.
hours a week, and it's not all yours.
Mhm. Right.
Right. So you really need to pay attention
Mhm.
to that equation.
Mhm.
And it's a little painful, right, to
Mhm.
realize that.
Mhm.
But it also tells you why
Mhm.
things are priced like
Right.
they are in the
Mhm.
marketplace, and why
Right.
you have to be really
Mhm.
careful to make sure that
Mhm.
you're charging enough to live well and
Mhm.
to not be
Right.
resentful.
Right. Right. And it's funny because when you're starting out, you always want to be cheap. Well, we get what we pay for, right? But I remember years ago when I was pitching to a potential speaker, or organization that I was going to be a speaker, and so we get all this, and then I said, and my fee is, and I got, you charge? And I said, well, yes, I am a professional speaker. And somebody told me, they said, don't say you're a public speaker, you are a professional speaker. That means you charge. And I said, yes, I am a professional speaker. And they said, well, but you love doing this, so why are you charging? Now, mind you, this was a chamber of commerce that was asking me this. And I said, my mortgage company doesn't take that for payment. But yeah, you're doing what you love. So why are you charging for it? why shouldn't I? I mean, it was one of the weirdest questions. And clear, I mean, this is probably 20 years ago. I still remember that so clearly. But, why shouldn't we get paid for doing what we love? And because there are parts of what we do that we don't love, so we need to make that up. But yeah, it was just such an unusual remark. And I ended up bartering with him. I got my membership for free, because they said, well, we don't pay speakers. And I said, well, I'm a paid speaker, so what can we do about this? And barter's fine. I mean, that's one of the other things, but yeah, I mean, it was just, you're doing what you love. So why should you want to get paid for it?
So, what strikes me there is like, well, what if you hated it? Would that justify?
Can I, and if I really, really hate it, can I charge double?
I mean, really though, like, well, I mean, does that mean like you're supposed to hate your work, or like if you love your work?
Well, and actually what it did was it made me feel bad for them and sad for them, right? Because it meant that they didn't enjoy what they were doing. It was a job. And, and we've all had jobs where you went and you did it because you had to, and that's okay. Sometimes we absolutely had to do that. And sometimes we still do.
Yeah. And sometimes running a business, you don't love everything either. I mean, It's not like, you're in this blissed out state all the time. I mean, there's challenges to deal with. The fun thing, I think, or the interesting thing maybe is that you grow from it. You learn, you develop as a person, it's like, that there's like a cliche, growing a business is the best personal development program you'll ever be paid to take. And it's just really true. I mean, there's so many things you have to learn about yourself, so many things you have to, sort of do to make it successful. So, and given that, it's like, and you're making that effort, it's like, you should be really well rewarded. You should love it. You should feel really happy in it. Feel like everything you're doing is to make your business more fit you closer and closer and closer, have it more and more dialed in. And that's something you develop over time. I mean, don't start a business today and have it be perfect next week. You probably have it be perfect never, but you're not going to necessarily like love it and feel, very clear and very sure. You're going to feel confused and uncertain and maybe wondering why you took the plunge and all of those things, which are part of the journey.
Yeah. I mean, there are times where I'm like, I'm just going to go flip burgers at McDonald's. Right?
What to do.
Yeah. And it's funny because there are so many things that come up, and a friend of mine, and I interviewed her on the program, gosh, it's been years ago. Her name is Adrienne Graham, and she wrote this great article for Forbes. And then she's written a book and actually made it kind of her career talking about this, but it's, no, you can't pick my brain because it costs too much, right? How many times is it, Amy, I want to take you to Starbucks. I'll buy you a cup of coffee. I've just got to run some stuff past you. And 2 hours later, they're still picking your brain and you got a cup of coffee. And even worse, you might have had to pay for your coffee.
And that's an interesting point too, because it's like time is our commodity as a business owner, right? Like you don't have 2 hours to squander because there's opportunity cost in there and things you're not doing. There's like having to get back into the thing and the time it takes and all of those things. It's like you have to be really, really careful, which it's a hard thing to learn to do, I think.
Right. Oh yeah, to tell somebody, no, I'm not going to do that. Now, it was really easy during COVID, right? And now the funny thing is, I have not attended an in-person networking thing since COVID.
I don't think I have either.
Yeah. And I've done very few let's get together for coffees. When I have, it's been very much a mutual type of thing, where, we've reached out. Now I'm more than happy. And part of it is the time thing, exactly what you were saying. I am more than happy to spend time with somebody on Zoom because I don't have to put shoes on. I don't have to get dressed up. I don't have to go out and spend my, and because I can do a half hour on Zoom, whereas if I went and met with somebody, maybe it's 30 minutes, or it's 3 hours. Now that said, if you think going and schmoozing with a client is how you're going to get the client, then you go and you do that.
I agree. You do what you have to do. And plus, like things in person is really powerful. I mean, events,
Right.
trade shows. I mean, I feel like you can accomplish like what you can accomplish in 15 or 20 minutes at an event,
Right.
like eye to eye contact. It's like the equivalent of like months of online
Right.
communication, literally. I mean, like things happen. And if you're if you're somebody who, is a schmoozer and likes to, likes that kind of thing. I mean, you get so much traction, but I'm with you. I'm very happy sitting right here.
I know.
I just really am.
Yeah. Now it's funny. I did have, and it was one of my mental health experts, on the program. And this was not all that long ago. She told me, she said, you need to get out and do that again. And I went, ugh. Because I belong to 3 different business organizations here in the Atlanta area. I think it's important to support your local businesses. And she said, and mental health person, she said, you need to go be social. And I went, ugh. But she was right, because we also need that mental stimulus of going in and doing that. But I look at their programs, I'm like, that doesn't interest me.
Yeah, but it's good to know what interests you and what doesn't, because there's, I mean, I think there's so much stuff out there and it can get so distracting, and it just like,
well, and especially as a freelancer, because you're thinking, I have to spread the word to as many people as much as I can. And you end up being eating chicken 5 times a week and, and all of those various things.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to find what works for you uniquely. I mean, maybe not like in the very beginning, like you're probably good to follow a proven path, but I think, I think there's room to not like things, not do things that you don't want to do. But I'm also with you. It's like, if that's what you need to do to make it work, you do what you do, you do what you need to do to make it work. But always with it, like sort of an eye toward improving, like knowing what you want and moving toward there. Like maybe you're not going to be there day 1 or year 1, but you can certainly iterate toward whatever that is. Like for some people, it might be, I want to make, X amount, but I only want to work Y amount, right? For whatever reason. Well, that's a formula that we work toward, because it's interesting. Like sometimes in some seasons, a client might be really looking to make money. Like, I've got some expenses, got things going on. I'm kind of client agnostic. I don't care so much who I work with, is that if I can serve them well.
I just need to bring in money.
But I want to bring in money. Other seasons, it's like, you know what? Business is rolling along pretty great. I'd like to work with different people. I'd like to,
and I don't want to work with some certain people.
Bingo. And like my idea now of who I want to work with and which problems I want to solve is more refined. And I know that now from having done it for a while. And so then you iterate a little bit, and it's not like necessarily an overnight thing. Like, oh, I work with, this group and I'm going to work with that group. Oh, great. They're lining up at your door. No, it doesn't work that way. But there's all kinds of very calculated moves that you can make within the time you have to like move toward the thing that you want. And I really like to empower people in that direction, because I feel like if you're not moving in that direction, you're moving in somebody else's direction, right? Somebody else is deciding, right? And maybe it's because you're being passive and you think you're not, that's not happening. But I just feel like it's such a big deal to start a business. Like it deserves that. It deserves your attention and your focus and your belief that you can make it what you need it to be.
Right.
I really feel strongly about that.
I love that. So, Amy, what do you tell people when they come to you and they say, I really love X, copywriting. I think I can do very well helping people with that. But why would I think I'm special? Because we all have, you have to be an expert.
Yeah.
What do you tell the people who are like, I just do what everybody else can do?
There's a place for that. And for me, it's positioning. Okay. And so what are you going to tell a potential client when they show up? You're going to say, hey, you know what? I'm really new. I'm super enthusiastic. I am so excited to get results for you and to do this. And like you talk about what's really true and why you want to do this and what you do bring to the table without worrying about what you don't bring to the table, for one thing. This is that moment, that train of thought moment.
Yes. See, and we talked about that before, so when they come to you and they say, I don't know that I'm an expert. How am I supposed to position myself as that way?
So what we do is we look at a lot of different factors, because And what we want to know, what I want to know is who
Mhm.
is your ideal client?
Mhm.
Who do you want to serve and why? What
Right.
problems are you good at
Mhm.
solving?
Mhm.
And then when I said it becomes a positioning thing, because now we look at who is that appropriate for?
Mhm.
For whom would you
Mhm.
be an ideal fit? Because
Right.
there's almost always some client that you
Mhm.
would be a fit for. And that's what we
Mhm.
look at. And then we look at over time,
Mhm.
kind of developing your
Mhm.
expertise
Mhm.
and then being like kind of a specialist. And what I
Right.
mean by that is like instead of doing the whole enchilada, you only do the
Mhm.
cheese.
Right.
You know, you only do a little piece,
Mhm.
but
But
when you
you
do
do that
something,
really, really good.
you do it really. Yes,
Mhm.
you are so good at it.
Mhm.
And it's really, it's so, if this,
Mhm.
this will seem maybe counterintuitive, but it's way easier to hire someone
Mhm.
with that level of specificity,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Because the generalist, you're kind of like not sure what you're going to get
Mhm.
or who they are.
Mhm.
But when you have an expertise like that, and you start talking about it, it's pretty clear that you know what
Mhm.
you're talking about. It's not your first rodeo, all
Mhm.
of those
Mhm.
things. And so I think it's fine to start as a generalist.
Mhm.
Let people know you're a generalist. Let them know
Right.
you're new. Let
Mhm.
them know, hey, I'm
Mhm.
I'm less expensive than the
Mhm.
more seasoned
Right.
person, and I'm going to work twice as
Mhm.
hard.
Mhm.
I mean, my thing when I got started, I tell people it's crazy, but I said, you know what? The project isn't done till you love it, until you're absolutely happy with it. I'm sticking around. You're going to
Mhm.
get your value.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was a crazy promise, but it worked for me.
Right.
I mean, it made people
Mhm.
feel confident, and I knew
Mhm.
the work was good. And
Mhm.
so I think when you're starting
Mhm.
out and you're new and you don't feel like you have
Mhm.
something special, know that what you have that's special is that you're there and that you
Yes.
care
Mhm.
and that you're
Mhm.
willing to solve
Mhm.
problems and that you're capable of talking
Right.
about that with
Mhm.
somebody.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't have to say you're an expert because you
Yep.
have to believe what you're saying. And then we have this other thing where everybody says they're an expert. So maybe that's where you differentiate yourself by saying, I am so passionate, I will make sure that this is done.
And I mean, it's funny because like, I guess you couldn't really call that an expertise, or maybe it is an
Yeah.
expertise in taking care of clients.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing with this whole sort of puzzle of like the service piece and the
Mm-hmm.
business piece. Great clients will pay really well for great service.
Right.
If people want to be well taken care of,
Mm-hmm.
and well taken care of, you know, it's kind of funny, but it means being reliable.
Mm-hmm.
It's communicating well.
Mm-hmm.
It means having
Mm-hmm.
processes. Um, and it's shocking how many people don't.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So if you show up just with those things, you're ahead of the
Mm-hmm.
game.
Mm-hmm.
It's there is so much traction in just taking good care of
Mm-hmm.
people. And I think for me, I really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a really important part of my
Mm-hmm.
business, but it's an
Mm-hmm.
expertise
Right.
and it's a really
Mm-hmm.
valued
Oh yeah,
expertise.
yeah. I remember one time hearing the great Peter Shankman speak, and I actually got to introduce him. This was really fun, and I've had him on the podcast a couple of times. But what he talked about was we are very happy with average. Whether we're providing that, we're happy with just being average, or worse, we as the clients are happy with receiving average service. We don't want to we don't want to get worse than average, but you really want to hit a home run. You give somebody excellent service, because we're just so used to average. Everything's average. Your cheeseburger's average. What it's all average. And so yeah, do that white glove expertise where you respond with you anticipate that they're going to ask you something, all of those things, and you really will stand out. And then, as you said, you can charge more.
Yes, and people love it. I mean, it's very
Mm-hmm.
rare for a client, to even be told at the beginning, like,
Mm-hmm.
this is how it's going to work. This is
Mm-hmm.
what we're going to do. This is
Right.
the
Mm-hmm.
timeline. This is what you can expect from me.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I need from you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just they feel like they're being taken care
Mm-hmm.
of.
Right.
Um, yeah, and it's pretty simple, but
Mm-hmm.
yes, it
Mm-hmm.
goes a long way. And I think it's one of the things that people overlook a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's wired for this, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody likes
Right.
doing
Oh
this.
yeah.
But
A
if
lot.
you,
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's a lot on your shoulders.
yes,
We've been talking about that. And some people just, they don't like that. They don't like the unknown. They don't like, heaven forbid you have to do sales. I mean, all of those various things. And yeah, they're much better at taking direction than giving direction.
Yeah, and that's tricky. I mean, I think to be a successful business owner, you have to learn to give direction a bit, and it can be uncomfortable at first. But it's funny. It's like, I mean, the thing that's true about your comfort zone. It's like once you stretch it, it stays stretched, right? It's not like the rubber band that like goes flipping back. And so like you can make these little incremental moves and get exponentially better. A little incremental move might be, charging a little bit more and see, like just testing the price elasticity in the marketplace, creating, a process or telling clients what your process is, or just like little bit by little bit, you can add things on that will impress people and draw them to you. And not just, reliability.
Right. Oh yeah. Your word is your bond, right?
That was my grandfather's thing.
Hey.
I love that.
We like grandpas, right?
Yeah.
And it does come back to, it when you're doing this yourself, it is all on you. Now granted, you might reach the point where you've got other people you're working with you, all of those things, but it is still you. And it's your reputation on the line. And if you're okay with just doing average, okay. But do you want to be known as the person that goes above and beyond?
Yeah. And those people get really well rewarded and really well paid. And just, I don't know, it's more satisfying, right? Because you deliver, not just delivering deliverables, you're delivering.
Right.
Right. And that's the kind of thing that gets you referred. That's the kind of thing that gets you repeat work.
Right.
Right. Because like if you have an average experience, you're like, yeah, okay. Right. Maybe I'll hire another average different person next time. But if you have an exceptional experience, you want that experience again, and you want to talk about it. And it's very different.
Right. And it is one of these things where we don't stop and think about it. We just think, well, we're just going to do the job. But, the same person who told me, did I want to make it a hobby or not? The other thing that she told me, she said, I needed for my clients to know that I thought of it as a business and not a hobby.
Yes.
And, and so and I remember she gave me things that I thought were stupid at the time, but then I realized, no, she really did mean what she was saying, like having actual real, now, this was 30-ish years ago, having business cards that were professionally done as opposed to making them myself. Having envelopes when we still like mailed things that were professionally printed, as opposed to, all these various things. And, there's a lot of those little things that it's kind of the window dressing, right? But when it's not there, we notice or and so it's just kind of having those little extra, but are we treating it as a hobby or a business? And one of the things she told me, and now this really will show how long ago this was, she said, don't use stamps. She had me get one of the postal indicia machines. Is that when, and so, and she said, it just puts you at a different level. I was like, okay. And then I realized, God, that was a stupid expense. Because there are some things people aren't going to look at, but other things they will. One of the really big things, do you have a website that looks professional? Yep. It's pretty easy anymore to be able to get something like that. So there's no excuse when you don't, or when you're going to meet with clients, do you, or even online, do you look professional? All of these various things. We were laughing before the program about, on Zoom, what are people actually wearing from the waist down? But that's all right, they're not going to see that. But what are you showing the people that you're asking for money, that this is a business and not a hobby?
And I think one of the things that really demonstrates that is processes.
Right.
And processes can be really super simple, like for example, like when you do a discovery call, there are certain things that have to happen. And it's like, and it's funny because like your potential client isn't sitting there with a checklist going, oh yes,
they asked us that they did this.
Right. But they know even if they haven't thought about it clearly, they know what they want to get out of that experience. So like I have a roadmap, 7 steps, a 7-step checklist for a discovery call. And you know what, Deb, like, here's the goofy part. It's like, it is so simple. It's like, you get in a conversation, you get in a meeting and, hey, how are you? And where are you? What's the weather? Whatever, right? There's chit chat.
Right.
That's what we do. The contractor freelancer has to be the one that segues off the chit chat.
Right.
Right. Because that's how you control the conversation with an agenda. If you don't, they're leading the meeting. And so that's like, that's very basic, but like what needs to happen is we're talking about, say, Deb, I'm so glad we could meet, out of respect for your time. I just, want to get going. Here's what I'd like to do today. I'm going to, I know you have questions for me. I have some for you. I want to talk about, like, this, maybe what it is, maybe I don't, this challenge you have. And then, we'll see if we have a fit, that sort of thing. Does that work for you? Does that sound good?
Right.
And now I've laid down an agenda. I've shown that I can run something. If I get their buy-in, now I can go ahead. But what I've just shown is I have leadership qualities. And these are good. If I can lead a call or a meeting, I can probably run a project. And again, they're not sitting there ticking off boxes, but they're thinking, this person seems to know what they're doing. And you get this feeling of confidence and being taken care of. And we're not even talking about the project or the deliverables yet, right? We're just talking, because people choose you. I mean, they choose the person, right? They're not choosing like just a solution to their problem. They're choosing who's going to solve the problem.
Right.
And so who you are matters.
Right. And I think it is so important to be setting up that framework, because so many businesses look at freelancers as they're doing it in their spare time. They're doing it as their side gig. They're not serious about it. So you need them to know at the start, I'm serious about this.
And you're a business owner, and this is how a business is run. And, it's funny, for years, I did not like the term freelancer because it's loaded with baggage. I mean, and there's a lot of,
it is a side gig and all those various things.
And it's often a side gig that's engaged in by flakes, right? Like, like if you could do a real job, you wouldn't be doing this.
Right.
And so it just turned me off for years. And now I've kind of embraced it, because I think what we need to do is just like change the perceptions and what's happening inside of those relationships, and make this like feel like a more legitimate feel.
Right. Yeah. Because to me, a lot of times, and you kind of mentioned this, a freelancer goes in and does one project.
Right.
And then they're done. And if you're hiring an agency, they're going to expect a monthly retainer. Now, I have an agency, but they want the monthly retainer. They want this, that. They've got, all these other things they've got to cover. And the freelancer's like, nope, I'm writing this brochure for you.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, and this will happen a lot with freelancers, they'll be, they'll be in a project, or they'll be in a call with someone, and they start, well, have you thought about this? Or you could do that, or, because of this, it leads to that. And they're like, and you see the person lean in, and they're like, oh,
yeah,
you do all that. Oh, you can help with that. And it's like, hello, business owner. Like, why does your client not know what services you offer?
Right.
Because we can be very, it's very hard to blow our own horn. It's very hard to promote ourselves, especially for women. As you said earlier, we're kind of taught to demur and, not.
Yes, we shouldn't brag about ourselves. That's not ladylike.
Right. And we should, we stay in these certain lanes. And so when you get into business, and also we're also taught not to talk about money much, right? It's not polite. It's not,
right.
You get in business and you're like, I have to look you in the eye and then talk real hard numbers. And it can feel super, super uncomfortable. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things you mentioned too is figuring out who you want to work with. Sometimes when you're starting out, or you've got, there are times where we're like, yeah, I'm going to work with whoever. But, I remember I pitched to a client one time to design a website for him. And I got a feeling, just one of those pit of your stomach, this is not a guy I want to work with feeling. Now, it wasn't a scary or anything like that, because that would have been totally different. But it was just, there's something about this guy. And I was right. And now he was going to pay a lot of money. I was just starting out. I mean, he had grandiose ideas, and maybe that was part of it. He had really grandiose ideas. And I was thinking, but, and I went with my gut. and told him no. And he was not happy because he did want to hire me. And I said, I'm going to decline it just, and I didn't tell him, you were a putz. And I got that feeling. I think I said something along the lines of this just didn't seem like a good match.
Yeah.
And he didn't understand why. And then I found out later he was very unethical. And so the pit of my stomach had been the good thing. And I think we all go through that, right? Whether it's, I don't want to write for that, I don't want to do whatever. It's kind of hard, especially when you're creative. And now we have this lovely little thing called AI, where it's, in fact, I had a client do this. We're going to have X person write this for you, and then you're going to send it out. And I said, no, because it's got typos in it. And I mean, all sorts of things. And they said, well, but we like what you do on that end. And I said, well, then I either do the whole thing or none of it. And I ended up doing none of it. But, yeah. And I think we've probably all had examples where the client has said, I own the rights to this picture. And they didn't. I worked for an agency one time where we got bit bad by that. We billed a client for, now this was when you did photo shoots and things. Now you still do to some degree, but we billed them for a photo shoot. We ran an ad in the LA Times. So this was not cheap. And we ran this ad, and the exact same image appeared in the LA Times for a totally different product, service, whatever. And, and so the person who owned the agency threw somebody under the bus on that one. But yeah, I think maybe that what I'm trying to ramble on about is our personal reputation is paramount. And if you're getting a feeling that a client is not going to respect that or want to push you, then don't do it. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to make. Don't do it.
Yeah, it's so great that you did that so early in your career, right? And I think that it's so interesting because, I have never regretted following my gut. I have regretted not following my gut. And it's hard. It's hard to say no to somebody.
Especially if they're waving money in front of you, right?
Yes. Yeah, but so good to pay attention to that because you just don't know what kind of nightmare, you've avoided. And I think, it's funny. I have this thing with like my nose, the people who are not a fit for me. I'll be on a discovery call, and the more they talk, the less I understand. Right. And it's sometimes that grandiose idea thing. It's like whatever they're talking about doesn't feel attached to reality to me. And I just so I'm just getting more and more confused. Like, you know what? I cannot solve this problem. Like, I don't get it. I don't know that I want to solve it. I don't even know if I like you. In some cases, and those are all those are all valid decision points, right? Those are all things to just say, what, something doesn't feel right to me. And, as hard as it is to say no, and I mean, tell me if you've experienced this. It's like there's such an opportunity cost if you say yes, because almost invariably you say yes to something that you don't really want. And it's often because of money, right? It's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I got to pay my bills and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But it's like almost invariably something else comes along.
Right. They're the clients that are going to expect you to respond at midnight or, I have a change. I have a change. I have a change. I have a change.
Well, good for you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yes, you have that right. And you should exercise that right and understand, like you did, like follow what feels right to you. Otherwise you end up in a world of hurt. You just do.
Oh yeah. And we've all, I think, probably taken on those clients where we're partway through and we're thinking this was wrong, and most of the time it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the client. No. Maybe it's just, you just didn't match with personality or skill set or whatever. And a win-win is when you can say, you need to go talk to this person. This is not working, but I'm going to refer you to these because they're going to be able to give you what you need. And then everybody's happy.
Yeah. And it's not personal.
Right.
Right. I mean, and so much of this isn't. I think that's an important point too. It's like, it's not about you. It's just, I mean, we don't get along with everyone. We don't like everyone. Everyone is not a fit. We don't want to solve this problem.
Yeah. And there are basics that as a business owner, you need to be doing. I mean, one of the things is a contract. I'm big on a written contract. And I was very lucky that the last place I worked was a bunch of attorneys, and they helped me write my contract when I went out and started my own business. And it's been tweaked through the years and all sorts of things. But you go back to that feeling. I've gone to people before where they've said, "Oh, we don't sign contracts." And then I say, "Well, then I don't work with you." I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm like, danger, Will Rogers, or whatever that one, yeah, it's like, I know. And especially if they couldn't explain why, because that's like, no, and to me, the contract protects both sides.
100%.
I have consultants that work for me, and I have contracts with them. And part of that is to protect them, and I used to be one of these, I just worked with everybody I liked and all that good stuff. And then I had a client call me one time and say, "You got a problem." I said, "What?" And they said, "Well, we've been working with this person, through you and all this." And they said, "You need to know she contacted us separately and said she can provide the service cheaper." And, and so I went to her and I said, "Excuse me." And she said, "Oh, I didn't do that." I said, "Honey, they forwarded me your email." But so then, I went back and modified my contract to say neither side will poach the client. Now, contracts are as good as the paper they're written on, right? But it was just kind of one of those things where it never would have occurred to me that she would have done that, because I wouldn't do that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. And then I had a client one time that it was so funny. We designed a new logo for her, and typical design firm, we had given several different iterations, tweak, finished. She liked this, and then several months later, she said something along the lines of, "Hey, my husband really liked one of those other logos and is using it for his business." And I said, "No, you paid for one." And she said, "Doesn't say that in the contract." And so it turns out her husband was actually an attorney. And so yeah, I know. And so he had looked, I mean, he knew. But it actually worked out really well, because his payment for doing that was he rewrote that section of my contract for me, where you get the one that you pick and everything else remains our property and yada yada yada. But yeah, I mean, that was exactly what she told me. It's not what your contract says. And and I love being able to do business on a handshake, right? Just doesn't happen anymore.
No, and I mean, it's like you said, I mean, the contract's worth the paper it's printed on. Someone said to me years ago, it's worth the price you're willing to spend to defend it, to defend the thing. And and while that's true, people will adhere more to the rules if they've agreed to them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
yeah, because even though you're the freelancer and you're working for big business X probably has a little bit more reserves, but they don't want to be known as the people who pick on the freelancers.
No, at all. And I think, it's interesting too. I mean, yeah, I think the contract language just like having a contract and having the certain things that are particular to your profession, like also demonstrate that you have experience.
Right. And you're not thinking as a hobby.
Right. And because you know what potential problems you might encounter, right? Like revisions, for example. Like I created a thing, or had a thing created called the pause clause. Saying essentially, if you stop the project, if there's not notice of at least 5 days, or if it takes more than 5 days, that there's going to be a reinstate. And it's funny because I've never had to enforce that, but referencing it gets people to get things done in the time that they agreed to in the beginning. If you don't get it done by Friday, I'm gonna, sorry, but per the contract, I'll have to charge you. Well, they get it done by Friday.
Right.
So like, it's helped me to be able to refer to that or just say, hey, we agreed to this. So like, yeah.
And the nice thing is these things exist in the interwebs. You can find some pretty good examples to at least start with. And like I said, I still tweak mine on occasion to do something different.
Yeah, but I think it's really important to have that the baseline, just have your baseline piece so that and like you said, even if you grab some generic like make sure it's generic, like written by a lawyer, that would be ideal. Not generic written by me.
Well, oh my gosh, Amy, this has been so much fun. And we only have about 5 minutes left. I looked down at the clock just now and went, oh my gosh. But and we have other things to talk about. So we just have to have you on the program again. But before then, how do people find you and what are the services that you provide?
Well, thanks for asking. So my website is the best place for all things me and LinkedIn. My website's amyposner.com. I am business growth mentor on LinkedIn, and I publish a lot of content on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. My goal is this year, particularly, I'm doing a little experiment to see, just to see what can happen with audience growth and delivering valuable free content. So I've done a lot of that. The services I offer, the main thing I do now is help people with these business challenges. And I do that through digital courses. And then I have sort of roundup meetings where people get to get in these, from my digital courses, get to, get in and ask me anything. I like being the accessible coach. Very often you buy a thing or you work with someone and you can't get to them. You can need their assistance. I actually like being able to be reached and answer questions and work with people. So that's kind of my MO. So I do a lot of that, and it's all in service to helping people to get these solid business chops so they can make predictable income and get out of the feast and famine. So
I love it. I love it. So much fun. So much fun. And, I think a lot of people think I could do this, but, and that's where you come in, is you can help them get from, I think I can to, I know I can, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah. And breaking these things down so that they're simple and not intimidating. I mean, some of this stuff sounds so official and formal and marketing and positioning and all of this stuff, but it's really let's look at it from the point of view of, what's gonna serve you ideally? What do you want? I call it what's uniquely yours to do. Once we figure that out, and I have a process for that, then we can get you something that you love rolling around in every day. And that's my goal. That's what I love it.
I love it. So much fun. Well, like I said, we'll have to have you. We didn't get through my notes and all that good stuff. So that just means that we need to have you on again. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, I would say my final thought, and I think I said it kind of a little bit earlier, but if you've sort of taken the step and demonstrated the courage to start a business, I really encourage you to do what it takes to make that business yours and to make it real and make it something that you can rely on and that serves you, rather than you being in service to it. And it's really possible, and it's not as hard as you think. The steps are just they're not that big. They just need to be taken.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having an absolutely wonderful time getting to know Amy Posner. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Thanks, Deb.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.